I had been driving for a rideshare app for almost a year when it happened. It was a late-night shift, the kind I usually preferred. Less traffic, better tips, and fewer talkative passengers. But that night, I picked up a ride I would never forget. The request came from a location near a gas station on the outskirts of town. I hesitated for a second. Something about the pickup spot felt odd, but I brushed it off. People needed rides from weird places all the time. As I pulled up, I saw him standing under the dim yellow light of the street lamp. He was tall and thin, dressed in a dark hoodie with the hood up, and he stood completely still, facing away from me. When I stopped, he turned his head slightly, as if he had been expecting me before I even arrived. Without a word, he slid into the back seat, closing the door softly. I greeted him, but he didn't respond, just sat there, breathing heavily. I glanced at the rearview mirror, but his hood cast a shadow over most of his face. The only thing I could see were his lips, barely moving, as if he were whispering to himself. I checked the GPS and started driving. The destination was on the far side of town, a long, dark stretch of road leading into an area with almost no streetlights. The silence in the car felt heavy. I tried to ignore it, focusing on the road, but then he suddenly chuckled, low, almost like a growl. "You ever wonder," he finally spoke, his voice slow and raspy, "what kind of people you let into your car?" I forced a small laugh. I try not to think about it too much. He leaned forward slightly. "Maybe you should." The hair on my arm stood up. I kept my eyes on the road, gripping the wheel tighter. A few moments passed before he spoke again. "Do you believe in ghosts?" he asked. I hesitated. "Not really." "Why?" He exhaled sharply, almost like he was amused. "Because I do, and I think you just picked one up." I felt my throat go dry. I glanced at the mirror again. He was still mostly hidden, but something felt wrong. His shadow in the back seat seemed darker than it should have been. Then I noticed something even stranger. The temperature in the car had dropped. My breath fogged slightly as I exhaled, and the windows started to collect condensation. I tried to focus on the drive, counting down the minutes until we arrived. But then the GPS glitched. The route flickered, changing directions rapidly before the entire screen went black. That's when he laughed again, louder this time. "You missed the turn," he said. I glanced at the GPS. There was no turn. We were on a straight road. My stomach tightened. I was about to ask what he meant when my headlights caught something ahead. A figure standing in the middle of the road, wearing the exact same hoodie as the man in my back seat. My foot slammed on the brakes. The car skidded slightly, stopping just before the figure. My heart pounded as I looked in the mirror. The back seat was empty. I whipped my head around. No door had opened. No sound, no movement. Just gone. I turned back to the road, but the figure ahead had vanished too. I sat there, gripping the wheel, trying to steady my breathing. My body felt ice cold. After a minute, I put the car in reverse, turned around, and drove straight home. I checked my ride history the next morning. There was no record of a trip at that time. No passenger, no destination. But when I looked in my rearview mirror, there was a single handprint on the fogged-up glass of the back window.